Welcome to the Financial Advisors Want to Know podcast, sponsored by Dominion Enterprise Services. I'm Catherine Tindall, CPA and founder of Dominion. We're a tax and accounting firm focused exclusively on serving advisors for their own tax planning and filing needs as business owners. At Dominion, we work alongside advisory firm owners to bring proactive strategy, clarity, and confidence to their tax planning so they can focus on growing their firms. The focus of this show is to cover different areas that I've experienced as a tax planner, working with advisor clients in their lives, building their practices. So let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show. This is Catherine. So on today's episode, I have with me Tiffany Silverberg and Jimmy Lim from Out and About Communications. They're a marketing agency that works specifically with advisor practices. Tiffany is the Senior Director of Marketing Strategy, helping to drive campaigns and, keeping things aligned. Whereas Jimmy, he's the Director of Marketing Analytics and brings all the data and insights background. So on today's episode, I'm really excited to have them both because we're going to be talking about something near and dear to my heart, which is newsletters. As some of you listening may know, I run my own newsletter that's for advisors related to tax strategy. It's also just we do it for our clients to kind of keep them, ahead of things that are going on when it comes to the tax stuff. But we're going to talk about newsletters and how to actually get people to engage with your newsletter, how to collect addresses, how to track this stuff, like the everything newsletter conversation. So thanks so much, Tiffany and Jimmy, for joining me today. So first off, I think the big first step with launching a newsletter is so what are you going to focus it around? Like, how are you going to launch this? I know for a lot of advisors, the compliance component of it is a big question mark because, depending on whether you're with if you're with a broker dealer or if you're an RIA, like that process will be different as well. But I think, taking a 30,000 foot view for advisors who don't have a newsletter and are maybe curious about what's involved with starting one or what are the first steps that they should be considering, what are some things that you recommend off the bat for them to be, thinking about if they're interested in doing a newsletter?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'd say, first of all, just for definition's sake, when we're talking newsletter, we're talking about sort of a regular email going out probably once a month or so, but that can vary. But just putting that out there, because sometimes we say newsletter and people think print and, minds go other places. So I'm talking about just kind of an email not drip, that goes out regularly. Where to start? I think the biggest thing is just what is the purpose of your newsletter?
Yeah.
And who's it going out to? And, we can dive into the nitty gritty of that as far as, what information you should be sharing, but just really what is the purpose? And I think the answer usually is, we want to stay top of mind with prospects. We want to be showing up in front of them on a regular basis, which is why we love newsletters, because you own the space, you own the list. It's not being suppressed. Everybody that you send it to has an opportunity to engage, unlike social media. Mm-hmm. So staying top of mind is the biggest thing. So as far as what to put in there, again, it's, who are your prospects and who are your clients and what's important to them? I mean, you already answered it for yourself, having that tax information, in front of your clients. So
yeah, and I see it, at least on our side, it's an opportunity to give value away in a one-to-many format, where it's not that heavy of a lift for us to produce something that's, hey, we got these questions in from this client or this prospective client firm this month. I think it would be good for everyone to hear that conversation. Or, something got screwed up, an advisor did something because they didn't know about this rule before they worked with us. Well, we should probably tell everybody that. So that's kind of how we use it. And I see it as both it's an opportunity to kind of just give with an open hand is my attitude with it. Like, we have way more people subscribe to our newsletter than we have clients. And, but also on the flip side, it's a nurturing tool, right? Like, a lot of those firms that maybe aren't ready to work with us yet will be in a year. And after getting, free value from us for a year, it's going to make that conversation easier because they kind of can see behind the curtain and they know what we're about, so I think it's one of those things where it is a long game kind of, project, because it's not like you're going to be doing you're not going to be, it's not going to be the top of your funnel, right? It's a nurture process. Like, it's a mid-funnel activity. And you have people where maybe they're not ready to buy today, but, especially on the advisor side, like if you have a really niche audience that you work with, whether it's like, your niche is your geographical area, and it could be things that are going on in town, like, or if your niche is like, I work with anesthesiologists, like that's going to be, pretty different. And so I guess like when advisors are thinking about doing these, it sounds like first step really is like defining down what you're going to use it for. And, I know at least on my side, the emphasis is, well, I'm just going to give value away, right? Like I'm just going to try to find the most valuable conversations to be having in a format that's easy to digest. Because, when it's the right time for somebody to actually reach out to us, it's just going to be the right time. It's like, how most people are not, most people are not in the buy, like they're only going to be in that like narrow window of buying or selling for a very short period, right? The rest of the time, they're not ready to make a move, right? Like they haven't had a significant life change, or they haven't had a significant complication that forces them out of whatever the status quo is. So at least I found on the newsletter side, just having that, like the top of, when they say top of mind, it's more just like when you go to have that problem, it's like, oh yeah, I know like so-and-so I've read stuff about getting on Social Security from this person, or I've read about like like how to handle an inheritance from this, like it builds a lot of power, at least, I would imagine.
Yeah, it builds a lot of trust. And that's the game for advisors, is trust building. Not only, like you said, that adding value, which is critical, but also just the timeliness of it, just knowing that this regular drip, it's a psychological thing. They just, they keep showing up. They're the experts. And like you said, we don't know when that sort of life transition is going to happen. What's going to trigger, I need to retire. I need to start thinking about retirement or things like that. You don't know when that's going to hit for every person, but just being there on a regular cadence.
Yeah. And I wonder too, like what your advice is around, like, for instance, with our newsletter, it's myself and another person on the team who are in client cases that write it. For the advisors themselves, like how do you recommend they go about the actual composition process? I've seen a lot of stuff, just newsletters in my day where it's like canned content, which is very different, like in terms for things that I subscribe to, oh, it's like, it's this person, like this person is writing me this newsletter. What are some advice that you have around the actual composition process?
Catherine here. Just wanted to say thanks for tuning into the show and hope you've been enjoying it. Since we're all at the mercy of social media algorithms, if you wouldn't mind rating the podcast on whatever platform that you listen to, I'd really appreciate it. And also, if you're looking to stay in the loop on current tax updates, what the firm is working on, and just the things that I think you as a firm owner need to be aware of when it comes to the world of tax, you can sign up for our newsletter using the link below. I only send out editions when we have really useful things to share or things that I think are important to have your attention and energy on. So let's get back to the show, and thanks again for being a listener.
Well, I'll let Jimmy take the lead on some of the data that we've seen, but definitely the more personal side is always better. And I think too, you have to just be honest with what works with your systems and with your culture. So some teams love to write. They love to, we have one client, the whole team gets involved and updates on their personal life, and it all goes in the newsletter, and it's amazing, but I cannot get any other client to do that. They just have their culture. But I know, Jimmy, I love for you to talk about, we see even just like COI. Nope, I'm saying it wrong. CIO. I always get all these acronyms. Just the CIO notes, the market updates, the, chief investment officer writing their, quarterly updates. Those tend to get a lot of open rates too, because you're the expert. Can we get that? Right? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, when it comes to like a quarterly review, like a trends, people tend to be really interested in that. Something that's very timely as well. People, get interested in that because like they would hear something in the news, and then they'll start thinking like, okay, how does it affect me? And when your newsletter shows up, when your LinkedIn shows up, it's a reminder, right? Sometimes we see something on LinkedIn, we might forget about it, but then we get the newsletter and we're like, oh yeah, I remember they sent out that post, now I need to read on it. So timeliness of article helps. How current affairs affect people's money, that is always of interest. And I would say also newsletter is a good place to actually show kind of more about your team, because again, we're talking about trust, right? We all kind of want to see who is that person that we work with. So newsletter is that opportunity to really push that out. And we've seen that do really well as well. Typically, I would say the moment you have your team, it would be like within the top 2 or 3 that's being clicked on.
Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting. And, I think something that would probably be interesting for advisors to hear. So like when you see newsletters going out, like what would you consider a good open rate versus an open rate that is pointing to, okay, you've either got a mismatch with content to audience, or like your subject line hooks are not good enough, or like whatever it is, right? Like what are, on the data side, like what are some of the, because I know with a lot of marketing things, you think like, oh, I'm going to send this and get all these reach outs and all this and that. And it's, oh, actually like a 2% open rate is great. I don't know what the number is, but maybe some of that data around what you would consider good performance versus if for people who already do have a newsletter, this is suboptimal performance on just some of the analytics side.
Yeah, I would say for newsletters, typically, we've like kind of focused on 2 things. One would be the open rate, because that tells you if people are even opening your newsletters. So that tells you a lot about your subject, title. Is it working? Is that something that you need to change? And typically, if you get like between 15 to 20%, that's kind of average. And then anything I would say kind of above 25 to 30 is considered good. And then once you get past that and we talk about click rate, then we're talking about the content, are people clicking or not? And in terms of like a strong click rate, I would say it's really anything above 5%. And then kind of an average would be like 2 to 3. And it's really helpful that you mentioned, sometimes advisors, they're like, what is a good number? Because 2 to 3 sounds really low if you think about it. But that's really, like considered an average performance. Like, so if you do like a 4 or 5, that's good.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of advisors, and this is true, I think at least this was true for my entrepreneurial journey, is like marketing really is a volume game. And when you realize like how much volume you really need to actually get like what's considered normal performance, you're like, whoa, like we have to do that much in order to get this return. It can be a little bit like, oh, well, am I doing a bad job? And it's like, no, you're not. Like this, it's just, these are the numbers, right? Like this is just how the physics mechanics of these things tend to work. In the body of a newsletter itself, do you recommend like formulations of like calls to action, or like when they link things, like if people have got multiple streams? So like if you've also got a podcast, like do you recommend people link back to other content? Like what are some maybe more like tips and tricks kinds of advice that you have when people are thinking about deploying these for, the actual structural sides of things too?
Okay. I can go first. Okay, so I'm going to talk about, people love to click on everything. Whatever you could put a link on, because again, just kind of echoing of what you just said, it's a volume game. So, put clicks where people would click, visuals, things like that. That always works. The other thing is, we've also seen from our own data from clients' newsletters that when you have a colored button that has a CTA, that tends to do better. And I would say, almost like 2 or 3 times better than if it's a text link. So these are the 2 things. Tiffany?
Oh, that's really good to know. Like the colored buttons work better than the links. Yeah. Anything on your side, Tiffany?
Well, I was just going to say, I think also it just goes back to really thinking about where newsletters almost always sit in the middle of the funnel. So where it sits in the funnel, and then what you want people to do, what's the point? So, I think newsletters can also be really helpful for just engaging and staying top of mind for clients and building that storytelling for them so that they are better at referring. Because they, you kind of have to keep reminding them of what makes you amazing and teaching them how to tell your story. So newsletters can be great for that. And in those cases, I don't really care so much if they're clicking through, if I can just tell the story right there in the newsletter. But if it's higher with prospects and I want them coming to the website and eventually picking up the phone, and hitting that, call us or schedule a call or, whatever that thing is on the website, then I'm caring more about those click-throughs and like Jimmy said, people click on everything. So if there's an opportunity to link something somewhere, link it. The images, buttons, internal links within your copy. We see that people like the links. Okay, that's
everywhere. And I think for advisors, like, what are your recommendations around when you've got kind of a newsletter where you've got clients on it and you've got prospects on it? Or like, do you recommend breaking those out and having a kind of client-facing newsletter versus a prospect-facing newsletter? Like, what's some advice around kind of how to navigate that dynamic?
What we've seen people do is if you want to do, it's hard to manage more than one newsletter. So that I'd be careful there. But what we have seen some people do is do a client-only newsletter sort of connected with like quarterly portfolio updates, if they're getting like, their own client update stuff, just kind of including it there. But if you're including them all together, then I would say just think of the goal as probably getting everyone to the website and engaging it with like a blog or, like you said, a podcast. You have a podcast or something like that. And as far as the main CTAs, I would say that's the one we see work. Generally, contact us, forward this, those sorts of things just never really gain any traction. So,
yeah, so more of just like hey, here's more things for you to check out from us.
It's just a reminder that you're the expert. Like Jimmy said, that timely stuff, if there's things going on internationally, globally, nationally, locally, whatever, just things in the news and how it relates to the market. That stuff always does really well. Or just, I don't know when this is coming out, but right now, like Trump accounts, everybody must know about Trump accounts. So
Yep.
that kind of stuff. So
yeah, that's true. And so like with the collection of email addresses for like a first newsletter launch, how do you recommend going about actually like getting the first editions out, collecting those emails? And then maybe if there's, a little time to talk about like compliance component of this as well. What's some advice that you have around those kind of areas of things?
So as far as collecting the email addresses, the easiest thing to do which also takes some time to prepare for, but is just to sign up for our newsletter link, on your website, on your blogs, things like that. The key there, though, is to really have a purpose behind what your newsletter is and be able to speak to it. So it's not just a sign up for my newsletter, but it's say every month we're going to send out this, or whatever. So you're giving them exactly what they're going to receive. You have a client that just sends it out quarterly, once a quarter, but it always has that market update from their chief investment officer, and it does really well. And so we're able to talk about it even from that perspective. Hear from our chief investment officer, stay up to date, that kind of thing. So I think just getting really specific. And then if you wanted to sort of take it to the next level, then you could do the whole build an ebook or a guide or, or whatever. But, maybe just start with here's what we're promising to deliver to you on a regular.
Yeah. No, that's great advice. Because I know something that I use it for on my side is, when I have a firm approach us where it's like, it's not quite the right fit for us to start working together, because of either things on their side or whatever it is. Or if it's just like, they're not quite ready yet, but I know they'll be ready in the future. I always just say like, hey, sign up for the newsletter because like we post in there when stuff is changing, or like we'll post in there the different due dates for things for you as a firm owner, like when they come up ahead of time so that like, oh, I got to issue 1099s to my contract. Like, what's up with that? Like, we do a thing every December on that. So I end up using it as kind of the like, it doesn't make sense for us to be in kind of a formal relationship, but I still want to provide value to you and help you. And I can give you that through this newsletter. And then maybe in the future, if, we're a good fit or whatever, we're there. But even if we're not ever a good fit, it's like, I can still help you, which is at the end of the day is, it's like, that's the ambition of, or I hope, the ambition of any company. And I know most advisors feel the same way, right? Like they're in the business to serve people, at least that's true for a lot of the firms we work with. I've found that it's also a good opportunity for that as well. Like it's a marketing thing, but it's also just doing good out in the community kind of a thing. As well. So I guess one other question that I have, in terms of, we did talk some metrics and things, but, is beyond so if you've got a process in place for how you're doing the content, a bit about, kind of how you want to be linking things in, how you want to focus it, maybe you get some feedback from people who are, clients that are on it of like, what do you think about it? What other like external processes do you recommend kind of having as scaffolding for doing a newsletter? So like on our side, like we've got a sequence of steps that we go through and like the different technical steps and the different review steps. When actually, making a process around this so that it happens consistently, which is, I think probably the biggest challenge for people is like, how do I actually turn this into something that is not just going to get put on the back burner and not get done? What's some recommendations you have around like actually processizing doing the newsletter so that it is happening on a timely basis?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's that's what we do. And yeah, that's the key, I think, with our clients. That's why they come to us, because we can get the strategy, the why behind it, and then how are we going to get this done? I think the biggest thing is, again, sort of, I think Jimmy mentioned the sort of knowing which content you're sending and just kind of splitting it out. If you're using MailChimp or whatever, it's literally a template, bringing that over to like Google Docs or something like that. So you're just filling out the same thing every time. And then, yeah, just kind of rinse and repeating. And if you're keeping it in-house, maybe make sure that the person who's doing it is passionate about it, and enjoy writing. Otherwise, outsourcing it is always an option too. But yeah, I think those templates are key, and a calendar and tips. You can kind of, as you new ideas, you're throwing them out there on the calendar and you can circle back to it,
Yeah.
So
that's great. So I guess before we go, any closing thoughts or things we didn't hit that you want to leave the advisors with, either Tiffany or Jimmy?
Well, I would say, like once you have a newsletter going, a lot of these like email platforms, they have great like dashboards that's so easy to use. It really would be a shame if you're just sending out and you're not reviewing your performance, constantly adjusting, just checking how it's working in your whole ecosystem of communications. Is it bringing people to your website? Are you setting up the right links? Are you seeing those links show up on your Google Analytics? Like all of this, so just take that little bit more time. And this is where I think a marketing calendar would help, because then it's really like a process. We have a newsletter, we're going to check what's the content, and then a month later, we're going to check on the data or something like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So for firms that are interested in learning more about kind of what you do, beyond maybe the newsletters or even just related to the newsletters, could you give some background about kind of how Out and About helps firms with either these or, just in general, kind of what you do with advisor practices?
Yeah, absolutely. So we work with sort of mid-sized firms that are on the path to growth. So especially, kind of hitting that scale point, that tipping point of like, okay, we've done it DIY in-house for so long and we need help. So, and we really come in, like I said, from those two angles. So from the strategy perspective and the sort of tactical implementation perspective, we have a whole team of strategists and implementers, everyone from, like I said, strategists, directors team, design, copy, all the way through SEO, development, implementation, the whole 9 yards. So like I said, we help you really figure out the positioning. That's a big part of our sweet spot, is really figuring out what your messaging is, who your target market is, how we're going to get to them. And then setting up those systems and kind of getting everything into a place of rinse and repeat. So that's what we do.
Yeah, that's awesome. So for those of you listening, I'm going to put contact info and how to get connected with Jimmy and Tiffany in the show notes, so you can reach out and say hello. I'm always interested in getting feedback on episodes as well, so always feel welcome to reach out to me via LinkedIn. Tell me what you thought about the episode. And, we can always, I know the marketing episodes, we always get a lot of hits on these just because it's fun, right? Like it's, I think for a lot of advisors, they enjoy kind of troubleshooting part of these areas of things. But yeah, I just want to thank you both so much for coming on the show, and I appreciate you making the time.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for listening to the Financial Advisors Want to Know podcast, again, sponsored by Dominion Enterprise Services. If you found this episode valuable, I would love to personally hear from you. Connect with me on LinkedIn and send me a message. I'm always interested in your feedback, future episode ideas, or questions you'd like to see covered in a future episode of the show. And be sure to subscribe to our monthly tax update newsletter, where we share timely tax insights and planning considerations specifically crafted for advisory firm owners and what we share to our own clients. We'll see you next time.